Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our sites, chimeraobscura.com/VM or vmspod.com to find more information, along with our RSS feed. And follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod. I'm just going to dive right into this one. It is a weird episode, but hey, as part of my recent, we'll say, struggles with anxiety, maybe depression, and, well, the unnameable overall, a lot of stuff has gone unattended or untended or, well, otherwise just piled up. Among them, I didn't have a guest lined up for this week's show. So on Saturday, after I set up a few guests for later in October and November, I thought I could take the week off, but I did that in August, and I don't want to make a practice of that because things can get weird. So during a walk, I thought, let me see if Charles Bivona is around and up for talking. Charles is a writer, professor, and now editor I've known for more than 20 years. He was on the show in 2014, and we tried to do a regular segment together in, say 2016, but that petered out. So Charles got in touch with me in July after the big email I sent out about my CLL diagnosis, and it turned out he was dealing with a health crisis of his own, which we'll talk about here. Anyway, Saturday afternoon, I texted him to see if he's up for sitting down on Sunday to catch up and talk about, as I put it, death, depression, books, and maybe the Buddhism that he practiced over the years and how that intersects with the other topics. He said he was up for it, and he also let me know that he just launched a Patreon to support this kind of fragmented autobiographical project he's writing. You can find that at patreon.com/Charles Bivona. I'll have a link to that in the show and episode notes, and I'll spell it out at the end of this one. Otherwise, not a lot to tell. Charles lost his best friend, Sang Lee, to a heart attack, I think 11 years ago, might be 12. And I lost my best friend 2 years ago next month, same cause. The mutual pal we occasionally refer to is Vincent Ches, a writer whose first book I published last century and who connected me with Charles and Sang when they were in the same writing group. Not a lot of background you need otherwise. I felt better after our talk, even if, the unnameable remains unnamed. I'm not in such great shape today, but I slept like crap. I've got a quarterly meeting with my board of trustees to prep for. There's other work hanging over my head. So, to quote the Hicks of Letterkenny, pitter patter, let's get at her. As caveats go, this one is kind of echoey, and I have done absolutely no editing to this episode. You are getting our raw conversation, for better or worse. And now, here's Charles' Twitter bio. Part-time professor and writer, poet, and retired ass model. I've worn many hats. Luckily, I look good in hats. Currently, the executive editor of Academic Things. He'll explain all that in the show. So now, the 2021 Virtual Memories Conversation with Charles Bivona. It's one of the funny things, if you could say anything's funny about my having leukemia, is, I sent out email to a list of 800 or 900 people, not to the work side of my life, although some work people are on that podcast email list. And it's sort of secret on the work side. Right. Even though, I was at a trade show a couple of months ago in August, and someone who's on both lists was like, so, how are you feeling, Gil? How is everything? To which a third person was like, what's going on? Like, oh, yeah. Gil didn't talk about that to the pharma side of his world, only to the podcast side. But I'll allude to it on Twitter and everything else. So anybody who bothers doing, a little looking around is going to know something's going on. But anyway, you got diabetes.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. I'll talk about cancer, and then we'll talk about how we're dealing with mortality.
Well, I mean, it was weird because when the pandemic hit, I was fortunate enough to be able to work remotely, and my wife was already working remotely. So I just decided I was going to get back into the kind of fitness I was into when I was younger, and, I was going to cook all my own food and take care of my diet. So I started losing weight. And at first, it was the kind of weight loss that I had always experienced. My whole life, I had been bouncing back and forth between 230 pounds and 260 pounds and 230 pounds, you know what I mean? So when I got into a depression, I would balloon up. When the depression would fade, it would go down. The doctors were always screaming at me about BMI charts, calling me obese on my chart, which I don't need, someone who grew up husky, as they used to say. Remember those days?
Oh, yeah. I was in that cohort.
You were a husky kid?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You'd never know it looking at you now.
No, I got the Auschwitz build, but
Too soon, man. Too soon.
As a Jew, I can't really.
No,
but, but you were ballooning
I finally was getting to the point where I was within reach of this perfect BMI weight.
Yeah.
And I was very proud of myself, and I felt very good, and I was very happy with the way that I looked for the first time probably in my life. I've written poems about, I had a teacher when I was in second grade who used to parade me in front of the class and say, see what happens when you don't eat right. Look at the fat on this kid. She would pinch me, So there's all kinds of trauma around this. I get that. I have all kinds of body dysmorphic issues. But it didn't help going to the doctor and hearing you're obese, especially when I was going to the gym 3 times a week and I couldn't get below 230. That's just where my body would sit. But now here I was, 187. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, sure, I couldn't see out of my glasses anymore, but, I probably just needed bifocals. I was getting older, right? And the eye doctor had told me that rather than get bifocals, if I could read without my glass. So there's all kinds of rationalization going on. Right? So I go in, like you, because of the pandemic, I postponed my checkup. I went in to get my lab work. And when I go into the doctor, I'll never forget, she comes into the room and she says, I'm just going to get right to this. She goes, you've got horrible, horrible diabetes. And I was just like, whoa, right? I cried right off the bat. Yeah. What my wife will tell you and what my doctor said is I went through the stages of grief
over the course of one consult?
5 minutes, because it was the first thing that came out of my mouth was, but I feel great.
Yeah.
And I think really what I was saying was I feel great about my appearance. I feel great about how my clothes fit. And that was so new and novel after living a life of always being told, you're too fat, you're too this, you're too heavy, look at this blubber, but whatever you want to say, right? It was such a relief to feel that way that I was ignoring a whole bunch of other awful feelings, and body aches, they go, oh, look, does your body ache? And I'm like, yeah, I've been in multiple car accidents and I've been depressed since I was 20. Yeah, my body always aches,
this is what I'm used to.
Yeah, I have a neck injury. Yeah, headaches, Dizziness. Well, you have me on 3 blood pressure pills that cause dizziness. So why would I ever say, ooh, I'm feeling dizzy, I better call the doctor? Yeah. It says right on the bottle. So I had to start injecting myself in the stomach with insulin 4 times a day, which sucks. I mean, it's but I walked away from that with this problem on my mind that I think is relevant to what you want to talk about today. Because right after I was diagnosed with diabetes, you were diagnosed
with chronic lymphocytic leukemia.
Right.
Yeah, CLL.
So I would think I was on my second day of insulin shots when that email came out, and I've lived a life of very fortunate perspective. I think that's the only way to say it, is that whenever something bad happens to me, I can always put it in perspective, because I've known so many people and I've been around a lot of suffering and death my whole life. I've lost family members to drug addiction. I've lost family members to cancer. I've lost friends to cancer. We lost a mutual friend to a heart attack, young, right? So no matter what I'm going through physically, I kind of feel like, I'm still here, I'm still alive. So there was this weird shift when I found out that you were sick, because I love you. I don't want you to ever die, A world without you is not a prospect that I look forward to. Thanks. That's number one. But number two, you and I have a connection with Sang, and Sang was one of the most important people I ever knew, and if I lose you, I'm tearing up over it. It's crazy. If I lose you,
I'm sure I'll be doing the same thing over the course of this conversations.
If I lose you, then I lose a little bit of him, and you guys had a completely different friendship than he and I did. You were into basketball together and all that stuff. So, fortunately, a lot of the things that I did throughout my life to manage my depression came in very handy with diabetes. I got into yoga to try to deal with the depression. I did a lot of exercise to deal with the depression. I did a lot of meditation to deal with the depression. And all that helped with the insulin injections. And fortunately, after a month of insulin, I was able to get off of the insulin and onto pills, right? But I did walk away from it with this feeling of, that's the best I felt about myself in my life. And I was
and it
dying.
Turned out you were actually rotting from within.
Well, when you look at what's really happening in your body, well, first of all, my blood sugar was in the 500s. And it had been that way for the past 3 months. I don't know if you know, the blood test they give you, it's this miraculous blood test called an A1C. I was actually going to I have this whole book of I kept a log of body sensations to try to get a hold of what I was feeling and, try to get a little more of a mind-body connection going. And it all reads like these poems about being diabetic. So I was going to maybe put it together as a collection of poems called A1C, because only a diabetic knows what that means, right? But it's this blood test that basically measures your glucose levels for the last 3 months, right? So for the last 3 months, I had been walking around with blood sugar 5 times normal. Okay. And what happens when your pancreas shuts down is the insulin is what allows your muscles and your cells to absorb the glucose in your blood. Okay. So without insulin, you're eating, but you're not getting the energy.
Not metabolizing.
Right. So what starts happening is you start to metabolize the fat on your body, and you start to lose massive amounts of weight. So again, the best I ever felt about my appearance in my life, and my body was eating itself, I need to contend with that. I'm not the kind of person who can just go, oh, well, the psychology of that needs to be unraveled.
I'll contrast that, or at least, my experience, because we're going to be bouncing off each other through this entire conversation, I'm sure, with the CLL was, as you've known me for 15 plus years, maybe 20. 20,
we should talk about when exactly we met. It's probably 20.
Yeah, it's before 9/11, definitely, because we had Smart Guy Salon back in the day. So
Salon
over 20 years we've known each other.
September 12th at Sang's house. Yeah.
When I was told, nothing you did caused this, nothing you do will affect its progression, and there's no cure. And there's great treatments for it that will knock it into remission whenever I finally need treatment. But, it could be years or decades before I progress to that point. But for someone who has spent his life as a micromanaging control freak, to be told nothing you did mattered in that area. Nothing you do will matter about that. And a pal of mine was afraid I was going to extrapolate from that into, licentious behavior. We'll put it that way. That if nothing I do is going to impact how this progresses,
you're going to start tightroping on
and other just shittier behavior that I'm used to.
You've changed,
committing.
I can tell you, since the diagnosis.
It's been a very interesting process. Not in terms of taking your hands off the wheel, but in realizing your hands were never on the wheel. And I know you've got the whole Buddhist background; you get all that in advance. For me, it was
Buddhism was an accident for me.
But still, it's and we'll get into that and what it means to you. But yeah, that was part of my realization is that there was never control on a cellular level. Nothing mattered. Nothing I did impacted it. All I did was live in northern New Jersey for 50 years, which is health risk enough, of course, but it's adjusting to that and understanding what that means and what it means for your life going forward. I mean, the oncologist line was, you don't smoke and you don't drink and you ran 6.5 miles this morning in like 90-degree weather. I can't tell you to change anything. Physically you're doing well and everything's fine. This, stay in good shape because whenever you need treatment, the better shape you're in, the better you'll be able to tolerate it. But nothing else matters, Gil. All that matters is how well science progresses, not you. And that's a weird thing to wrap your brain around.
I mean, on some level.
No, I don't believe positive thinking.
Now, I'm not talking about positive thinking.
Good. Okay.
I'm not a magical thinker at all. I mean, in fact,
one
of the first conversations that my wife and I had when we first met was we spent a good hour laughing about that book, The Secret.
Yeah.
We watched the movie. We were laughing our asses off. I mean, it was like we fell in love over this.
Visualizing your bliss.
No, I don't mean that. What I mean is, you can't control the disease. You can't control the progression of the disease. You can't really, there's nothing you can do. But don't you think that if you keep your body healthy and you eat well and you keep doing your exercise and you keep your stress under control and you keep your mind in check, that if you do get sick, you're probably going to have a better time with treatment.
Yeah, that's the only benefit is literally.
Right, well, I mean, that's a big benefit.
Oh, it is. Your body will weather the immunotherapeutics better.
Right.
That's literally it. It won't affect how well they.
That's literally it. I love the way you say
that. Yeah, that's all there is it won't impact how the immunotherapeutics affect the lymphocytes.
Right.
It'll just mean I'll tolerate it better.
Right.
There's nothing I can control, nothing I can do, and it's like, okay, and
it's so weird. I think you should talk about how this conversation occurred, because it's so weird how this conversation occurred.
You and me?
Well, this actual conversation that we're having, you text me.
Yeah, I didn't have a guest lined up, and I could have skipped, but I skipped one in August, and I don't want to fall into that practice. And it occurred to me, Chuck has gone through something traumatic, different than mine, but you and I know each other. There is no book I need to read in advance to sit down, no notes I need to take. Right. And we can talk like two people about what it means to be, in my case, 50 and looking at this. And I forget how old you are.
I'm 49.
Yeah. So closing in on 50, we're in that midlife thing, and looking at mortality and various histories of depression and everything else we're going through. And I figure, what would listeners like more than to hear that for an hour?
And I thought it was funny because, I always want to talk to you, and I would love to talk. I mean, I would talk to you whenever. You can stop by anytime you want with your little
that's
setup.
Part of my thing also. You reached out, which I appreciated, right after my news and shared with me your traumatic news, which I'll say as a sidebar, I had a friend who... same thing, just turned 50. He and his wife had scheduled their colonoscopies. She had hers first. They go in and discover stage 4 colon cancer, spread to liver. We need to start you on chemo next week. His was scheduled for weeks later. I'm sitting there like,
This isn't someone I know.
No, this is a pharma side person. But I was like, do I tell him about my whole thing? Because, my thing is small potatoes, all things considered. I filled him in on it, but I split the difference. I didn't tell him that morning I got my colonoscopy results back and they were just fine. I
Right.
figured,
Well,
let me
I mean,
not tell him that, but I'll just tell him I got
Yeah.
leukemia and it's off in the distance. But
I don't know. I feel like,
But I've been trying to spend more time with people that I've known. I connected with another mutual friend of ours, mutual person we've known in recent months.
You can call me.
I reconnected with our friend Vince Chaz a few months ago.
I had a weird, because remember when you responded last night, I said, I'm looking forward to talking to you, and you responded, but you say that now, right?
Oh, that's
and
just
I
me
was
being
like, I'm anxious enough that I'm like, what does he mean by that?
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
So, like, I said to Luce, I was like, you don't think he's going to, like, show up with Vince and try to do this, like, hey, I just found out I have cancer, let's all kumbaya. I mean, I wouldn't care if you did, you know what I mean? Like,
No, whatever drama exists, I don't care about other people's drama anymore. I don't need to resolve anybody else's shit.
there's no drama. I mean, it was just,
There totally is on his side, but whatever. My whole thing is, I just want to connect with people who I don't have to explain everything to and who I don't have to perform in front of.
Right.
It's one of the neat things with running. The running guys, I go with these 2 70-year-old men and various friends of theirs. They don't care about literature, podcast, or anything like that. So I don't talk about shit. We talk about the Yankees, water heaters, their grandkids. There's no Gil, I was doing a podcast with blah, blah, blah the other day. I'm like, that person
Have you read the new book by...
doesn't exist.
Yeah,
none of that exists.
Yeah.
We're just running. And it's good having those different selves. At the same time, I'm making an effort to try to, connect with the people who have known me for a million years so we can,
Right. Well, I wanted to talk to you. I felt like, I never want to ask you to be on the show because you've interviewed a lot of people that I know from my education. I mean, you interviewed Harold Bloom, for God's sake. You know what I mean? A lot of people
still
know
one of my
me.
high points. Yeah.
Well, I was like thinking about, it was funny because I was thinking this morning that I haven't read any novels in forever. You came with novels, so now I have the motivation to read a novel. And do you remember when we were kids, everyone wanted to write a novel, right? Like I haven't, like somebody who throws money at me on Patreon is pushing me to write a novel, right? And I was thinking maybe it's an anxiety of influence thing. And then it hit me like, shit, this guy's like interviewed Harold Bloom. And he's like coming to, he's coming to my living room.
This is my novel.
So
this is it. These conversations.
Oh, I understand what you're doing, man.
This is a huge mosaic.
I have a lot of respect for your show. So when I think, oh, that would be a good thing to talk to Gil, I don't want to impose on our friendship, but we were together on September 12th, 2001, watching the collapse of the Twin Towers over and over and over, remember? And trying to, everybody was there that was in our, you call it the Smart Guy Salon. I remember that. And like, now I'm teaching, or I was teaching, I kind of moved away from teaching now, but I just spent 20 years teaching freshmen in college, and the last group of students that I was teaching, they were born like in 2001, so, and the odd thing about it is like they talk about 9/11, and you gotta understand the years involved here, right? But they talk about 9/11 the way when we were in high school and freshmen in college, we used to talk about World War II. So it's not as far in the past for them, but they kind of regard it as it is.
Chronologically, it's not that far. But,
it's not that far.
But we've accelerated so much that, I can believe that. My world is very fortunate. I don't deal with people younger than me. Because I'm terrified. I stay away generally. I try and find people my age and older. But
they get a bad rap.
No, I know.
Like I say. They really do. It's like anything. If you take the worst behavior of the worst of us and say, oh, it's everybody, But I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of nursing students too. I seem to always end up at universities where I end up teaching composition to a room full of first-year nursing students, and they're critical, science-based, smart people, you know, males and females and everything in between, you know, which is fun. But no, I like teaching. I'm actually feeling a little remorse now because I've moved on to being the one university I work at. They had me, I guess I was sort of an academic tutor, coach for their graduate students. So I was working with right now I'm working with this doctoral student, and I've worked with a couple doctoral students. And because of that work I did there, they decided to promote me to be the executive editor of all their literary journals. So they have one now, they're starting two, and I'm the executive editor of the whole thing. So
I've got some stories I want you to read. I'm just kidding.
No. Well, I mean, it's an academic journal too, right? Yeah. So I spend most of my time reading, you know, social science papers now, which is a far cry from, I mean, I used to be the poet guy, right? I was like, you know, I want to be the straight Allen Ginsberg or whatever I was trying to do, Walt Whitman, you know. Yeah. We were all trying to be something.
We had our we were trying on different faces. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'd rather you lead the conversation, actually. Because I wander.
Yeah, well, as do I. But
I am a wanderer.
You know, but getting your life back under control then?
Yeah, that's the thing about my particular medical problems. We were living in Florida when Trump became president. And then we had to get out. I mean, Florida, I can't not live in New Jersey. This is where I live. Everywhere I've tried to live in California. I tried to live in Florida.
I've been in the same house for almost 50 years, dude.
I know.
Freaks people out.
But. Yeah, but that wouldn't freak me out. That would make me feel great. But I came back here and my blood pressure was just out of control. I don't think you know what it was like pre-2016 election in Central Florida. It was like the entire place was paved in Trump pen signs.
I can imagine. It's one of the weird things being in northern New Jersey, or being in New Jersey, where
you have no idea.
Yeah, once you cross over into Pennsylvania and it's a swing state, and then you see every billboard, you know, is a political sign one side or the other. Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of, I guess, what are they, Latinx now? Is that the...
I always thought it was Latinx, but it turned out I was wrong.
Latinx. Latinx, you're funny. You're old, sir. This is because you don't work with the young. Latinx, there were a lot of Latinx people when I was down there who were telling me that they were going to vote for Trump, and that was shocking. And then when he won, I mean, I was in my in-laws' house, you know. My father-in-law is this, he's this amazing old 70s Politico guy. Like, he's just like in his 60s now, and he's just been following politics, you know. So we went down there. I went down there. We were going to save some money, you know. We were going to try to buy a house. And we were going to we're going to watch the first female president get elected. You know, you remember, nobody thought Donald Trump was going to win.
No one in our world.
No one in our world.
Yeah. My friends out in the Midwest who were like, yeah, you don't really get what's going on, Gil. I was like, yeah, you're just insane. But yeah.
So I came back to New Jersey and we got a studio apartment, and I just decided that, you know, I was done. All I'd ever wanted to do was publish a small collection of poetry and get this story about my father off my chest. And it's funny you mentioned Vince and Ches, because he always said, you know, if you cannot write, you shouldn't. You know, if you can get away with it, if you don't have to, don't do it, because there's a torture to it. I mean, it's not like a fun life. You spend a lot of time in solitude, frustration, trying to get these stupid symbols on the page to do what the ideas in your head are doing. It's a pain in the ass. It's probably bad for you at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? So I tried to quit. You know, I said, I'm not going to go on Twitter anymore. I'm just not going to do any of that. You know, the hell with it. I'm done. You know, I had made a little bit of money. I had made enough money that one year on my taxes, the accountant wrote down, you know, how much. I think it was like $10,000 I made one year, and he wrote down writing, you know. And I was like, all right, I'm done. You know, I made $10,000 as a writer. You know, I'm going to go and just teach, and, you know, that's it. And I became, you know, a very content teacher. I started to really enjoy helping other people get over the anxiety around writing, and it became more like, look, you don't have to be a novelist, you don't have to be a poet, but you do want to be the guy who can write your boss a 250 word email that gets right to the point, because that's going to get you promoted, and they all responded to that. But at the same time, I was saying, if you want to learn how to write that 250 word email, that's going to make your boss go promote this person. You should read a little poetry now and then. You should check out Shakespeare. I mean, he invented half your language. You should, do you know what I mean? So I got really into that. And then my friend Cedric, this filmmaker who my wife used to work for, who has become, I guess, a client, but more of a client, colleague, mentor, friend sort of guy. He said, I remember we were just sitting around one day and he said, how fast can you read? And I said, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't really think about it. When I was in my doctoral program, it was more of like reading to survive. It was like, I have to read. Somehow I have to take in 3,000 words in the next 3,000 pages in the next week and be able to discuss it, because at that level, the professor, it would be you sitting around like a round table with maybe 4 other people, and the professor would come in the room and toss the book on the table and say, go, and you had to just kind of like
pretend you knew what you were talking about.
And on the one hand, it was terrifying, but it was kind of like, reading boot camp, right? So this guy, Cedric, he decided that I should challenge myself and just to see how many books I could read if I just kind of like made that my thing. And I was like, all right, it'll only help me teach, right? So I just started reading nonfiction books, and I was using Goodreads to keep track. And I had some trouble with my vision when I was younger, so I got really good at consuming audiobooks either alone or while reading. So I've got meditation helps with that, helps you focus and stuff. So I just started like anytime I heard about a book in the news, I would just go get it from the library and read it. Yeah. So that just became my I was just gonna like read as much as I could, and be with my wife and have a nice little life and teach. That was my plan. And I just kept saying, this book, this last book, the older I get, and I look at it and I'm like, no, so it's like, I don't think I'm the kind of person who could not write, So that's where I'm at. I've just started this new Patreon. And, what is Charles Bivona's creating paragraphs? Because I mean, that's really all. But I'm trying to keep it to like 200, 250, 300 words, because the one thing that everyone who did read the last book, it was funny because the people who read it, I get 2 reactions. I either get, this book is great, it makes me feel better about everything I've been through, it makes me feel like there's hope for someone like me. People who have all mentally ill people love my book. Whatever.
It's a good demo.
It's a good demo. And who else loves the book? Families of disabled veterans. Because they're like, wow, you really know what it's like to be in a situation with someone who is reliving a war in your house. It's a real thing. So they react to it, but everyone who has read it and given me feedback has thanked me for keeping it short. One, because, who the hell wants to read 250 pages of child abuse and, depression. So I'm kind of trying to write something now that's more of a self-portrait for my nieces and nephews. I don't have any children of my own, but my siblings and my siblings-in-laws siblings-in-law have all done
the job. They took care of breeding. And,
there's so many children in my family. It's crazy, So the front page of the new project, my oldest nephew's song is on there, and it's just I'm basically going to start from the beginning and reflect on not just the life that I've lived, but the things that have happened historically. Because, you know, I'm trained as a literary critic, literary theorist, but I'm also trained as a writer, but I'm also trained as a historian. I'm also trained as a, you know what I mean? I kept moving into new things because I didn't want to stay in one field. So I want to try to bring all that. What?
Why is that? See, this is the part where I said you were going to be sorry. I'm kidding.
No.
Well, why were you peripatetic like that?
When I went into my master's program at Rutgers Newark, I remember that I thought I was going to fail. Mm. And I spent almost a decade revving up to go to graduate school because I just thought I was too stupid. You know, I mean, I had been told I was stupid by people my whole life. So it was like, I'm stupid. I'm too stupid to do that. And because of depression, I had eked out of college. You know, like I had to fight my way back from almost being kicked out. You know, I had to appeal. I had to get doctor's notes and all that. So I just didn't think I had what it took. And I finally got going right around the time 9/11 happened. It's funny because my very first graduate class was the Monday night before.
Yeah, it happened on Tuesday morning.
Yeah. And
oops.
I was with Jack Lynch at Rutgers Newark. He's an 18th century scholar who studied with Paul Fussell. Awesome guy. And he gave a lecture about how, you know, we don't really know when historical periods begin and end. They don't really break up the way we tend to break them up. You know, like there's this thing called the long 19th century. It didn't really, you know, if you really want to talk about what defined the 19th century, it didn't begin, you know, at the first day of the 19th century. It's a whole thing. And we did this whole exercise, like, you know, when we still don't know when the 21st century really begins. Not really. I mean, yeah, it's 2001, but we're still kind of living in a 90s mindset. That was this whole lecture. And then the next day, bam. Right?
Surprise, and now we know when the 21st century starts.
Yeah. And that's what I said the very next time we met for class. I said, well, Professor, now we know when the 21st century starts. And according to him, he tells that story still, you know. We're still very good friends. But then I met a man, I was in a poetry class, and I had this great professor that nobody else liked, but I loved him because he would just sit there and read poetry to us for 3 hours and explain, like, you know, so we were going, he took us through like all of Yeats, The Wasteland, you know what I mean? Like and everyone else was like, and I was just like, keep going, right? Yeah. It was great. But we got to this poem, this bunch of poetry about the Vietnam War. And I hadn't thought about this stuff in forever. You know, I mean, I was in therapy for 20 years. Now I'm in graduate school. I'm still going to therapy because I was afraid to stop, really. And but I thought all that was behind me. And as soon as I read these poems, I wanted more. You know, so he told me that there was a professor, H. Bruce Franklin, who taught a course at a course called, what was it called? American Literature in the Vietnam War.
There you go.
So I took the class, and what I realized was that I didn't really know a lot about the war that my father fought in. You know, I was kind of ashamed of myself. Here I am, this educated guy. I've done all this reading, you know, and I kind of pride myself on being an educated guy at that point, right? But I didn't know shit about the war that had destroyed my father. I mean, you can be real about it. I tell people my father's body came back from Vietnam, but his mind died there. And so I took that class, and I read. And when I went into my doctoral program, I'll never forget it. They had us all in this big banquet room. You know, Drew University is like this beautiful old place. So they had us in this beautiful banquet room, and it was all the new doctoral students who were like maybe 20, 25, 30 of us, right? The whole faculty. And I feel like I'm in this Victorian, like, and look at me, man. I haven't changed at all, right? I was wearing old jeans and a polo shirt, right? I don't spend a lot of money on clothes. So we go around, and everyone's talking about what they're interested in studying. Right? Oh, I want to study newspaper trends in like London in the 19th century. You know what I mean? Like, I want to study. One guy actually said, well, I thought was interesting. I think about him all the time. He said he wanted to study The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, the influence that book had, which is crazy because, you know, that's Trump's religion. Trump. Right. Yeah. So then they get to me, and I'm like, I really want to try to get my head around the experience of traumatized soldiers through their poetry and memoirs. You know, I really want to try to get as close as I can to viscerally understanding what that feels like. And really what it was is I wanted to forgive my father. Yeah. You know, I desperately wanted to forgive my father because I wasn't over it. I was furious that I had grown up without a dad. And I knew what it had done to my life. I had been through enough therapy, and I was self-aware enough to be able to look and go, well, look at these relationships that didn't work out. It's because I was, I had all these abandonment issues. Why? Well, I was abandoned, I mean, it just keeps coming back to this. But as I studied the war more and more, and the war literature, I started reading this stuff about how war trauma, there's this idea that war trauma is contagious, that if you live with someone who is going through war trauma, it will spill onto you, and you'll start being traumatized by their trauma, and it's almost like the war trauma is spreading. I thought this was amazing. I started consuming this stuff like crazy. Like the idea, wait a minute, you're telling me that my father was infected with something psychological in the Vietnam War. I mean, it's a metaphor, but and then he passed it on to us. That's what happened. And it was, because he didn't get any help when he got back from the war. And, so I got more and more, I got a lot politically radical at around 2006. In the sense that I started getting in league with I started meeting
fellow travelers.
I went astray. I started meeting and talking and commiserating with a lot of anti-war activists. I went on marches, against Afghanistan and all that stuff, and I started writing, the blog about growing up with a guy who was basically out of his mind with war trauma, because I did have a psychiatrist telling me once that it sounded to him like my father had a psychotic break, at some point when I was 9, right? So I was churning away trying to figure that out in the PhD program. So I think the reason why I was switching around so much is because I was just trying to take an interdisciplinary approach to this problem of empathizing with my dad. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm a traditional scholar. That's why I say I'm an accidental scholar. This was really about healing in the end. And, fortunately, I've been able to turn it into, at least a small living. You don't make a lot of money working for universities no matter what you do, but...
you should coach football.
No. No, the football players don't like me. No. They never do. Well, I always tell them, look, man, the data's a little alarming. No one's sending their kids off to play Pee Wee football anymore. Your sport's in trouble. Yeah. You better think about that. Oh, no, okay.
I'll be the one who breaks through. And
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's why. I think my whole life I've been motivated by two things. I wanted to feel better, because I felt terrible all the time. I mean, and I think the interesting thing about talking to me about death is that up until I was 35, maybe not 32 is probably fair. I just wanted to die all the time. I was really suicidal, you know, and I'm not anymore. So death doesn't necessarily scare me. I mean, I don't want to get COVID. I don't want to get cancer.
Yeah.
I think what you're going through is particularly interesting because cancer, I mean, that's like the official scariest thing in our culture, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. The thing I got diagnosed with is blood and not tumor.
Right.
You know, my mother had ovarian cancer, and, you know, you hysterectomy, you find all the cells, you get everything out.
Yeah, but now you're dealing with your circulatory system. Yeah. Anywhere your blood goes, the cancer goes.
It's what's bred in the bone. Yeah. You know, it all... In the, corollary to your A1C poems, I began putting together The Best Bad News, the collection of wit and wisdom that I've come up with in the past 3 months. And, you know, we'll say joke early on was, you know, the fact that the X-Men was my favorite comic as a kid.
And now you have a mutation.
Yeah, my mutant superpower is making shitty leukocytes, and it showed up at 50. You know, what the fuck? I was, you know, not Wolverine. I end up with this dumb superpower. But yeah, it's, you know.
I think that the hardest thing, especially for someone who's anxious, is to keep yourself from imagining what's going to happen.
Well, that was and I've gone into this, but we should talk about it more explicitly because I just allude to it in other places. The 10 days between the second blood test and the first oncology consultation.
We didn't know.
Right. Yeah. My doctor just sees the second the first blood test. He's like, your white blood cell count's high. Maybe it's an infection. Go back in 2 weeks, get another one. Mm-hmm. Second one, he calls me. So, Gil, here's a hematologist you need to go see. I look him up, and of course, he's not a hematologist. He's an oncologist because there are no hematologists. It's hematologist-oncologist. So it's fine. Right. The giveaway was that his office was called Regional Cancer Care Associates. So I was pretty sure I knew what I was heading into. But that 10-day stretch, and it could have been worse. I call, you know, right after finishing that one, I call Regional Cancer Care, set up an appointment. Oh, well, he's not available for another 5 weeks, but his associate's available in 10 days. Is that okay? I'm like, what do you think I'm going to say? Oh, I might have cancer. I'll put it off for 5 weeks. Let me get to it. No, I'm going to take the earliest goddamn appointment I can.
Yeah, please. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and
you got to remember, this woman, she deals with people like you every day.
Yeah, and it was just that was entering Planet Cancer. You know, you're entering a different world at that point.
Right, it's a whole world, whole industry.
And it's a different culture. Like, I had a conversation with a great guest this summer who's had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma for 20 years. And I said to him, like, what is the protocol in the waiting room? I've had 2 consultations right now. I'm not sure. Are you supposed to look up at the other people? He said, nope. You look down at your phone or a magazine. You don't make eye contact. If you're in chemo, everybody's usually on the same sort of schedule, so you're all in there, you know, weekly.
Yeah.
Then the problem is when one person isn't there, who's going to be the first one to say, hey, where's Phil? And everybody else is going to just kind of look down and away. I'm like, great. Thanks, Haywood. I've got that to look forward to.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's that 10-day stretch from that second blood test to first consult. I went into worst case mode. I said, if I have 6 months left, you know, what do I do with it? And where does it go? And what do I do with this show? How do I ensure that it stays up somewhere? Are there people I want to record with before I'm gone? Are there, disposing of my stuff, making sure the business is taken care of and all those things.
Right.
I started planning out all that stuff for 10 days.
You got your house in order.
Yeah.
But that's something.
The reprieve is one thing, but there's no reprieve. The way
well, the reprieve in the sense that you found out you weren't immediately dying.
Yeah, I got you've got CLL.
Now
don't worry, you got the best thing you can
feel like you know what's going to kill you now?
No, I mean there's the chance when I was on my run this morning through the crazy place.
I don't mean like that.
Yeah, but that could have been, you know, I wipe out in this brook and crack my head on a rock and I'm gone. And,
but is it the kind of thing that...
They say this is something people die with, not of.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, the survival rates for this are tremendous.
Oh, so,
no, it's again, I got the best bad news.
Yeah,
I got
that's what you
cancer,
said
but I
to
got
me
the
when
most
I talked to
treatable
you.
one. I got one that's probably not going to hit me for years. The survival rates, it tends to hit older people, and the survival rate is 83% over 5 years. And so somebody who's 50, if I ever start treatment. Now, that said, recently I look up COVID vaccines and CLL to see what the interaction's like. I'm what you call treatment naive because I've never had to progress to treatment. Treatment naive, you're fine. You have the same percentage of efficacy with COVID vaccines. People who've been through even one round of BTK inhibitors, because this is all immunotherapeutic stuff, that drops from about 90-something% to 23%. You don't make antibodies the way you should.
So now you're in a real high risk.
If I ever progress and need treatment, I'm getting that booster shot and getting another one every 5 minutes, whatever it takes. But that worst case thing, and I've contemplated it, what it means, what conclusions I drew, and what you change about your life. What I change about my life, we'll put it in personal terms. There are little things that seem trivial that I've changed. But one of the interesting and strange things is that I used to check the stats on my podcast. I used to check various other, metrics and stats for things in my life. I don't do that anymore. I stopped looking at everything. The podcast, I see the numbers every week when I log in to post a new episode. And that's it. I don't, my way of phrasing it is there's only one set of numbers that matters in my life now. It's what my white blood cell count gets to.
Yeah.
And same thing with you and
man.
your diabetes.
Yeah.
You're looking at that number. That's a number that matters.
Right.
The Patreon numbers are nice. It's nice when people are contributing some dollars. The dollars matter.
It does make it easier to write when someone's paying you.
But the other sorts of numbers, all the things that are how many people are checking this, how many likes did I get?
No. That can be manipulated now. I mean, I don't know
that's all algorithm driven anyway.
Well, have you seen the movie Fake Famous yet? It's
No.
a documentary. You should check that out. They do an experiment. They take 3 kids and they do an audition. Who wants to be famous, right? They take these 3 kids and they just stage all kinds of fake photographs and they buy all kinds of likes and it's interesting to watch what happens to how these kids react. They don't like it, because they know it's not real, But I always tell my students, you have to be careful.
It's a dopamine hit.
It's not just a dopamine hit; it's an illusion. It's a lie. Like,
I'll put it this way: I started making art this year. I started drawing end of January. Never picked up a pencil in my life. Discovered I had some ability. The more I did it regularly, the better I got with these things, and I was stretching and doing stuff. And I was posting an image every day. Whenever I'd finish, I'd put it up on Instagram, and then in the evening, I'd go to Instagram and I'd look and see people liked it, or Twitter, same thing. I'd go to see about likes, and realized it's a hamster wheel. And now I post everything on like a Saturday morning at 5 a.m. because I know no one's online. Nobody's looking, because I know whatever all those numbers are like, if I just post a picture of my face, it'll get 4 times as many people jumping on it. I nice looking guy, whatever. But
it's not even about that.
Yeah. It's just algorithm
pictures get more.
Yeah. Algorithm wants to see eyes and people.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole chasing metrics and chasing numbers thing that I'm
Well, I went back to Twitter after 4 years of just basically Twitter. Like, as soon as Trump was out of office, as soon as Trump was off of Twitter, I went back. Because, he was like he was like a tank of noxious gas that just kept spewing. I mean, it was unbelievable. So it took a good 3 months of consistent tweeting every day before I got any traction. No one was seeing what I was doing.
The traction thing.
Yeah.
I've learned not to care. Well, the things I post are for me and not for anyone else.
Well, I think the reason what might be different is that I approach it as a writer. I think I think of the tweets as like drafts of sentences, and then whatever gets some traction, I'll pick that up and turn it into a post.
Oh, see, that's the thing. I don't rely on anyone else's opinion, which is why I'm not a writer. You know, I post shows.
Well, you've always been. I feel like I knew a guy who was in a PhD program once for psychology, and he took a class on poetry once, and he told me that the guy's name is like Professor Jonas or something.
I go Professorson. That's still mine.
But he said the class should have just been called The Poems That This Professor Liked, you know? And I feel like this show is just the people that you've always
This is a general interest magazine if everybody had my interests. Right. That's where I came up with the if we did live on that planet, unfortunately, it would be a square world. We're all in Superman costumes flying backwards. But yeah, this is a general interest magazine if you all shared my interests, which for God's sake you should. People ask what's the mission of the show. It's interesting people who said yes when I asked them.
We should talk about social media now that what do you think about the Facebook whistleblower?
I got off
Facebook a while.
Yeah, same thing around Trump time. I quit beginning of 2017. It's great. You know, Instagram I stay on even though it's a Facebook property. But even there, like the way my settings are done, the people I follow, like I literally don't get the influencer thing. Like I'm following, these wackadoodle artists and cartoonists and pals of mine and other people. And it's just like, I'm not following anyone to see what they're wearing. That's not a thing. I know you're trying to sell me things and that's what you're here for. But like I say, it creates this hamster wheel, this sense of selling ourselves.
Right.
And, it's a thing I said to Vince when we talked. It's something you and I have talked about. My job is what pays the bills.
Right.
This is what I do for love. And that zine I put out last year, Haiku for Business Travelers, I gave a copy to Vince when we got together a month or so ago. And he immediately started the wheels turning and how I could get distribution. I said to him, just stop. It's free.
Well,
no, it's free.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be sold. It's not digital. It's just a gift that I'm giving. And that's all it is. And just once you free yourself of any sense that someone should pay me for any of this stuff, they pay me for my ability to lobby. They pay me for my ability to bring contract manufacturers of pharmaceutical products together to discuss best practices. Right. That's what I do. And the money from that goes to this stuff. I'll tell you a funny thing happened. I was asked about serving on a board for a nonprofit for the future of a smoke-free world or something like that. It's this anti-smoking secession thing.
Right.
And it's funded by a huge settlement with Philip Morris. And I went through 2 rounds and trust me, the money from this would have been absolutely ridiculous as a board member. But I went through 2 rounds of interviews and got weeded out in the second round, but made it through the first. And I explained everything that I do, and they said, we're wondering, are you uncomfortable at all about the fact that the funding for this comes from the tobacco industry? Mm-hmm. And I said to them, have you been listening to anything I've said so far? Because I'm paid by pharmaceutical companies to lobby for. No, I'm okay. As long as the money is going to a good purpose. That's cool.
Right. And the money's going someplace. You just got to make sure it goes someplace good.
In my case, what my members pay, they get that I have this weird personal life thing. They also get that it doesn't detract from the time I spend working for them, and doing this has actually enhanced my abilities of public speaking and other aspects of the day job of the day job. But yeah, there's a sense of people having a hustle and all that.
Well, it's the gig economy.
Yeah, and I've been very fortunate. I mean, the joke is that all these years where people in my arts side of the world wondered, why is Gil spending his life editing a pharmaceutical trade magazine and now lobbying for these guys? What's great is all you motherfuckers who goofed on me about that, or just thought that in the back of your heads that I should be writing a novel or doing the arts, whatever. I'm helping save the fucking world right now. My guys are the guys who are actually making the fucking vaccines.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like, holy crap, this is the one goddamn time in my life I know more than anyone else about the most important thing in the fucking planet. And it's been an interesting phenomenon like that. But
I never thought I was going to make a living as a writer.
No.
Never. I mean, I never thought I was going to make a living as an academic. When I was in...
And that's questionable, too. I'm kidding. Go
Well,
on.
when I was in my PhD program, I mean, everybody would be talking about this, imaginary future tenure position that they were going to get. And I was like, some of you, most of you are wrong, you know. And I just never played that game. I said, I've had to hustle and do various things to survive my whole life, and I don't think that that's ever going to change. What I can do is figure out how I can take this skill that I have, the ability to read and comprehend and retain, and then write about what I've read. I mean, that's really...
Remember,
my
I
talent.
have no pharmaceutical experience,
Right.
no science, no regulatory, no governmental.
I remember
nothing.
when people used to shit on you about working for a big pharma back in the day. That was funny.
And I just, fuck everybody. But it's that sense of what was explained to me many years ago when I was thinking of quitting the magazine and launching a trade association. I was talking to one of my pharma pals who likes my arts side too. And I'd said, I'm afraid, at this point, I'm 42 years old, and I'm going to be a guy with a background of print journalism in my 50s when all magazines are gone.
Right.
And this guy's like, Gil, your background isn't print journalism. It's bringing people together. No, it's not even that. He said, it's just bringing people together. You know how to get all of us to talk to each other when we're all competitors and shouldn't be talking. And, we all, you can bring people together. You know how to get us at ease. And I was like, well, I guess that's a marketable skill. Never really thought about that. And that turned into that.
It's tough when you fall in love with or you become deeply attached to an idea of who you want to be.
Yeah.
Again,
supposed to be a writer.
That might be
comics guy.
another thing that Buddhism did for me is that I really don't believe that my personality is real. I think it's a figment of my imagination based on stories I've been told about myself and feedback. You know what I mean? Like so when it comes to death, like I don't think I'm going someplace. I don't think there's anything particularly special about humanity other than we are self-aware and we have the ability to think of that we're really special. You know what I mean? Like, I spend a lot of time reading about consciousness. I find that the truth of consciousness is a very good antidote to depression and anxiety. Like, what am I even obsessing about? Like, you know what I mean? Why am I taking all these thoughts seriously? We don't even know where they come from. You know what I mean? So it's
we know those things intellectually. It's just tough that there's almost a chemical reaction within our brains. It's still
right. Well, I think there is a way if you review things enough and you meditate on things enough and you reflect on things enough that you can get things that you know intellectually into your gut. I think that it takes a long time, but what the hell else are you doing? You know what I mean?
But this is my experience with the worst case scenario. We all know we're going to die.
But
But once it was finally put in front of me for that week or so, that was the veil.
It's very clarifying.
Yeah, and it's been interesting. It's been interesting to see what things I've readopted. What things I've gone back to a little bit.
Right. Well, what I was getting to before is when we got back from Florida, I was sick. My blood pressure was through the roof. So they put me on a new blood pressure pill that was also an anti-anxiety pill. And I mean, we've talked in the past about how the first time I took this one drug, Lexapro, it was like the missing ingredient. Like a lot of the worst of the depression just went away. Within a week. It was a miracle. This had the same effect on the anxiety. A lot of the angry outbursts that I was experiencing and a lot of the irritability and low frustration tolerance, that all, as soon as I had this pill in my system for like a week, gone. Okay. Now I'm having the same experience with diabetes. it's, I have this monitor in my arm that measures my glucose levels constantly. Okay. One of the wonderful things about having her health insurance, very fortunate, because I know diabetics who are still sticking themselves in the finger. So I'm absolutely grateful to have this thing. But what I've noticed now is that when I start to feel that kind of dragging, like, oh, I'm feeling really depressed and the doom feeling, it's usually because my blood sugar is over 200.
Yeah.
Almost always. And when I start feeling anxious and scared and paranoid, it's because my sugar is below 100, right? So I'm starting to realize that a lot of the things that I took as personality flaws were physiological. So the last time we spoke, I was just coming out of this like, oh my God, I've been depressed my entire adult life, So now here I am at 49 and I feel like, oh my God, I've been a physiological mess my entire life. And now, I was taking insulin for 3 weeks. I got promoted at work.
We just watched the movie Another Round yesterday on Hulu. It's a Danish movie with Mads Mikkelsen. It's for middle-aged teachers following a psychological study decide they're going to stay drunk all the time and just start getting better and better.
What's it called?
Another Round.
Oh, I got to see this.
Yeah, and Mikkelsen is the sort of lead, and he starts drinking in the morning. They stop after 8 o'clock every night. They're trying to do this scientifically. They've all got their breathalyzers. But yeah, he finds that he's just looser and better able to connect with his high school students and everything else. And the psychologist and the music teacher.
The comedian did that with marijuana. He did like the same thing that the guy did with Super Size Me. He just he stayed stoned all day, every day for a month.
Works for some people,
I don't know that. You know what I mean? Like the guy was literally like smoking every hour. It was excessive. I've had friends I had a friend in the 90s who died of cancer, and he was a very good friend of mine. And I spent a lot of time with him when he was in chemo, and he used. At that time there was no medical marijuana. He got a bunch of illegal marijuana. And it was helping him. Like he would say to me, he's like, he used to call me Chucky. I think it's funny that you still call me Chuck too. He says, Chucky, I go to chemo, I come home, I'm puking, I can't eat, I can't sleep. He goes, I smoke a joint, I have a nice meal, I take a nice nap. But he couldn't get past this idea that he was like, doing something that his mother wouldn't like, or
I don't want to be a drug addict.
I don't want to be a drug addict. I don't want to be a druggie. So it was like on top of dying from cancer, this guy was like going through shame of like, smoking weed. So I thought that was kind of weird. And I've been into that for a while. And then I had a friend die from an opioid addiction, the overdose, So I don't know why I started talking about this. I kind of strayed. What were we talking about?
You got me. I think we meandered all over the goddamn place, but that's okay.
But I know it's like, I'm at this place now where I feel like...
We're talking about the physiological issues that governed your mood or governed your mind.
Well, the weird thing is there's this episode of Star Trek Voyager. Remember that show?
Never watched it. I was an original series guy and a purist. I'm kidding. Go on.
Yeah, I was an original series guy and a purist. No, there was an episode where they came upon a prison ship that had been damaged, and they beamed the survivors on. And one of the guys on the ship was this horrible sociopathic mass murderer, but he was terribly wounded. So, the holographic doctor, I'll inject him with nanites and it'll, and it healed him. But what it also did was found the thing in his brain that was off, that was making him sociopath. And corrected it. And when he came to, he just was overwhelmed with guilt for all the people he had killed and all the remorse. And he's just a normal human being. So the question of the episode began, is this guy, physiologically, he's a completely different human being now.
Is he guilty or culpable?
Is he still guilty and culpable of these murders? He was sentenced to death. He was on his way to be executed. And they left it up to the families of the victims. And of course they said, yeah, kill him, But it was an interesting question. Like,
if there's something physiologically going on that is making you act a certain way, not really how responsible. I mean, you owe people apologies and all that stuff, but like, how much should you really beat yourself up over it? I mean, weren't you just kind of a victim of a disease at that point? So I think that you get to I was telling her the other day, I think back over the last few years of like, you know, things I've said to people, like angry outbursts I've had, and I cringe. But then I go, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, see, we're different because I have this Germanic sense, or probably Jewish sense of responsibility and duty. Even if someone said, Gil, you weren't in control of your feelings, I would still feel the guilt.
I still feel guilt. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a guilty shame guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Come on. But I'm working on that. You know, I'm starting to think like, well, you know, because even she's like, you know, I haven't lost my temper over anything in like years, you know, like it's hard to even believe that used to happen to me, but I used to get filled with adrenaline, and then my blood pressure would go up, and then my liver would start producing sugar, and, you know, all this cascading nightmare would happen. And I think that led to a lot of the resentment that a lot of people have toward me now. But I also think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of social media at play. I think that social media when you have tens of thousands of followers on Twitter or on Instagram or whatever, it's not like people are sending you money. You know what I mean? Like this idea that eyeballs are dollars, they're not.
Yeah.
They're eyeballs. That's all. Most people just are gawking. A lot of people are falling into the bandwagon. You know, I had a tweet go viral this past week, and it's just interesting to watch because you can watch on the analytics how people interact with the tweet. Yeah. And people will you'll see the number of profile expands will go up, which means people are checking to see
who is this guy? Yeah.
How many retweets did it get? Not even who is this guy. How many other people have reacted to it?
Okay.
How many people have retweeted? How many people have hearted it, right? Liked it. And you see the profile expands go up, and then you see the retweets, you know? So it's like, it's a total bandwagon. Oh, everyone's into this. Let's do it too.
It's happened once for me.
Right.
And I thought, oh, this is a pretty funny, it's a funny phenomenon. I appreciate watching it happen over a couple of days. And it was a very witty joke I did, but at no point did I think I have to start doing this. I gotta become I was like, oh no, I experienced it once. That's enough for me. It's entertaining to see it happen, but you know.
Well, I mean, I had an ex-girlfriend when I was in high school who said that I would be a great drummer because I really don't like to be
in front,
the front man.
Yeah.
Right. So my natural
we all want
impulse,
to be the center of attention.
Look, I don't want to be, I mean, come on, dude. You remember back in the day, everyone wanted to write a novel, and I was like, I'll write poetry. Yeah. Vince used to say, no one's going to buy poetry. Oh,
no one's going to buy his novels either. But
you know, attention freaks me out a little bit, right? So
But that's our paradox, isn't it? That we want to be the center of attention, and we think we're we think we're worms. We
don't want to be worms.
No, but we think we're totally inconsequential. It's our depression. We're totally inconsequential, and we're the center of the universe. Somehow we square both of those things as ways of tormenting ourselves. I go through that. My closest friend goes through that, who was the closest thing there is to me in a second body that's out there. That weird sense of being totally worthless, and without you, the universe would stop. You know, it's a weird trip.
Well, I think it's because I read somewhere that the unconscious mind thinks it's immortal.
Yeah.
And we consciously know we're not. So there's this tug of war between.
Consciously, some people don't. No, I mean, honestly, there's a solipsistic nature to this stuff. It was a chunk of my realization, or my post worst case scenarioing during that phase was that I knew the world would go on without me for the first time I really thought about it and was fine with it. Whereas, you know, years earlier, it just wouldn't have occurred to me that the universe would still exist in my absence. Not that I was consciously making myself the center of the world, but
right.
That's what we believe on a weird level.
Well, the Twitter thing is what I wanted to get to, because the Twitter thing has cost me a lot of grief. I've gotten a lot of wonderful things from being popular on Twitter. And I've gotten a lot of grief too. I mean, it started because, Sang Lee was like, dude, if there was a platform that was made for you, this is it, He pushed me onto the platform. We started blogging at the same time. It was a team thing. So I was very comfortable. And then he died, And after he died, I kind of went, when someone that you love dies, you go through this creative explosion almost. You're just like, fuck you, life. I'm going to, and I went through that. And it got me some attention. And like I said, I wanted to be in the background. So my immediate instinct was try to share this with everyone I knew, you with your thing, with your podcast, and anyone I knew who was doing something creative, I would try to pull them into it. But I immediately realized that it didn't work. It didn't work. I could not, whatever it was that I was doing that people were reacting to, I could not transfer it onto
replicate
someone
it
else. Unless someone was in trouble and they needed like donations or something, I could do that. That was fine. But it was weird in the sense that I had a P.O. box set up because I really didn't want anyone to know my address, because I had known plenty of people who had people showing up at their house. And I'm like half afraid that someone's going to kill me and half afraid that I'm going to kill somebody, and it's just like, I don't need that. So people were sending me envelopes of cash in my P.O. box, I would tweet that I needed something and people would send it. Like I said, I'm thinking about buying one of those depression lamps, and someone sent it to me. I need a new pair of shoes that, some guy sent me his army boots that he wore in Afghanistan, because I was working as an adjunct. I was broke. And I was kind of being like, look at this. I'm a college professor. I can't afford a pair of fucking shoes. Like, what is this, And he sent me his boots. I've never been able to wear them. I can't, come on. They're in the closet. It's like, thank you. I really appreciate it. But it led to a lot of people. I tried to help a lot of people, and some people got really mad at me when it didn't work. Live and learn. I thought I could turn it. I wanted to have like a little sort of, me, I wanted to have a little beat pad. Look at this place with bongos, and that's just not where we live anymore. Everyone's off on their own little agenda and their own little mission, and that's fine. And I try to help people when I can, but I've realized at this age that, I'm a solo act. This is the way it's got to be. I have a lot of people backstage, so to speak, helping me, like my friend Cedric. He's a professor of the dramatic arts, we spent a good hour last night talking about this interview, just how to pace myself, This is useful stuff, but
did any of it hold up, or did you go completely off the rails from the beginning?
A little off the rails. She's a programmer, so I don't ever have, my website goes down, she takes care of it. I don't know how to do something. And because of her, I've learned how to code. And so now I have this research life that is completely separate from my creative life. And, I'm sort of like T.S. Eliot being a banker during the day, or,
being a pharmaceutical lobbyist.
Being a pharmaceutical, Wallace Stevens selling insurance, not that I think I'm in any way.
No, but these are guys who had
but there's a model. There's a model there, the model of, are you going to live in poverty and just spend all your time reading and writing and trying to, become like Chip? Chip, the Chip model, Delaney. I have nothing but respect for Chip. I admire Chip. I very much like that I didn't know how famous he was until I knew him for a long time. Yeah. So he's just like this old, Santa Claus guy to me. He always has been. And I love him. But I can't be only sitting at the thing trying to come up with imaginary worlds and imaginary stories.
But he also had academia. He had professor jobs for decades. So
right, but that's because he was so famous as a writer, don't you think?
He was also writing those things when he was 18 years old. And
right. Well, when we met him, we were
30 something. He was the first, and I was writing about this with a pal of mine on Instagram recently, or we were exchanging comments there instead of email, because God forbid. First friend you had outside of your age range? Because he kept thinking younger people, this pal of mine. I was like, no, Chip Delaney is the first person I became friends with who was 20 years older than me, and we were friends. There wasn't a professor thing first. There wasn't like some other dynamic. We just became pals, And from there, obviously I spend most of my time with these interviews with people who are in their 70s and 80s because I hate young people. But, that's just me and my thing.
My favorite story about Chip Delaney was when we went to the WWF restaurant for lunch that one time.
We tried to pick good venues, and he loved pro wrestling. So,
What a great experience.
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
I was reading for a podcast that never happened because he canceled 2 days before we were going to record Martin Amos's most recent novel. And the best parts of it come at the end where he details...
What's the title?
Inside Story. It's a metafiction, autofiction thing. It's hit or miss, but the final 3 parts are his father, Kingsley, experiencing Philip Larkin's death, his best friend, Amos himself experiencing Saul Bellows' death, and then Amos's experience with Chris Hitchens and his death. And Kingsley Amos's experience with Larkin, he comes back from the funeral in Hull and realizes he never visited Larkin a single time in Hull. Larkin always came down to London, or they both traveled somewhere. Right. And as he sees more and more of Larkin's world in that day that he's there for the funeral, he says, crying to Martin, I didn't know him at all. And this was the closest person in his life. I experienced something similar when my best friend died a few months before the pandemic, about 2 years ago now. And when it comes to Sang, who was the closest friend you had, and I think I think you would say the closest friend you'll ever have.
Yeah, I can't replace him. I tried. I've been trying, inadvertently.
It was a line from Hitchens that one of the signs of old age is the realization you can't make close friends. But what did you not know about him? What did you realize in his death? Holy shit, this is a person who maybe I didn't know. I
didn't know how sick he was.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean physically.
Yeah.
When our friendship started, I was too broke to have my own place, so I was still kind of I would live with my family much longer than I wanted to. So I would basically use Sang's place as a refuge, And then when I finally got a place that I was happy with, when I first moved in with Luce, you remember the old place, Rutgers Village, yeah. I was like, you know what, man, you've been coming to my place forever, right? So let's just start hanging at my house. So he would come over, and he was over all the time, and he was teaching her how to code, and they were working on it. It was great. It was like one of the greatest years of my life. And that's when the blog started. That's when the Twitter thing started. That's when everything started. And then he died, and his landlord was a friend of mine from graduate school. That's how he found the place. She called me when the police found his body, and I went to clean out his apartment. And I won't get into detail, but there's a certain thing that happens to you when you're deeply depressed. You stop vacuuming, you stop sweeping, you stop doing things like that, you stop cleaning your dishes. right? That's my thing. And I mean, you knew Sang. I don't think we're bad mouthing him in any way to say that, he was a slob. He was always a slob. Yeah. But his slobness, I guess, is that even a word? His slobitude.
Yeah.
Instantly took on a different light when I was standing in his apartment right after he died. Mm-hmm. I saw it, and I was almost like, how didn't I see this, And I just instantly started to sob. I wrote about that, and that was like the last chapter of the book, the chapter in the book about Sang. I talk about how I collapsed in his chair and just lost it because this was going on right in front of me, And I was so preoccupied with the fact that I was feeling better and my life was going great. And my best friend, my brother, really, he's as close to me as my brother. I love my brother, but I don't want to have my brother call me up and screaming at me, But Sang and my brother got along really well too because they both cared about me on that level. The most endearing thing that Sang ever said to me is he said, "I wish I was there when your father was beating you up because I would have helped you." It's like, Jesus, dude, thank you. That's a sweet ass thing. I don't, but I felt like our friendship had been way too much about me and not enough about him. Yeah. And I also felt like a lot of what he went through was because of racism. I had seen him experience some of the most unbelievable racism, right up in his, people just come up in his face and ching chong and do all kinds of stupid things like that, and he used to get furious and but what do you do about that? And I think about that a lot. I have a lot of friends now who come to me, Cedric and my wife, people who exist in this country with brown skin, and they tell me that they're terrified to leave the house. They're terrified whenever they see a cop. They're terrified whenever they see other white people. They see white people, And I am, because of the friendships that I've made and the family that I married into over the past 4 years, I am periodically the only white person in the room, and the stories I hear are upsetting. And to then go, I say this to my students all the time, I say, every black person I know tells me that they live in a state of constant terror. And the white people I know tell me that's not true. And I can't swear that. Don't tell me, as someone who's been mentally ill, don't tell me about my experience. Don't tell me what other people are experiencing. So, I'm in this weird place creatively where I don't really know what to do. I mean, on the one hand, I think I'm comfortable admitting that I have a little talent. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But I'm a cisgender, I'm a cis male white guy from, New Jersey. And
but that's my excuse not to write either. Nobody wants to hear a 50-year-old white man who's going to prattle on about, existential issues of living in suburbia. But it's a cop-out.
It is a cop-out. It's a total cop-out. Yeah. And I'm like I said, I'm coming to terms with that. And the other thing I'm trying to come to terms with is my entire education. I have learned about writing and creating art and literature as a way of projecting your ideas and your existence into the future for future generations. And I'm not entirely sure there are any future generations coming. You know what I mean? The climate change news preoccupies me quite a bit.
But again, it almost reminds me of the beginning of Sex, Lies, and Videotape, where the psychiatrist is trying to get Andie MacDowell to talk about her reasons for, I don't say frigidity, but, whatever it was defined as back in the 80s. And for her, it's all social issues. Where's the garbage going? Where's this and that going? Right. These are all, excuses to keep from the personal aspect of living your own life.
So the way I've resolved that is, well, really what got me to write, to start the Patreon, I don't even want to call it a blog, the Patreon collection. It's really
the autobiography in progress.
Well, it's going to lead to another book. That's just my process. I start with these posts and then I put them all together and rearrange. You know, that's how I draft. I've accepted that. That's fine. I had to go through a lot of, this isn't how you should write. This isn't the kind of writer you should, that kind of stuff. But the way I've resolved it is I'm writing for my former students. I'm writing for the children in my family. I'm writing for my friends. And there were a few people who came to me and said, we miss your blog. Please start writing again. So, I mean, that's really, what else could you ask for as a creative writer or a memoirist or whatever the hell I am? Because I don't write anything creative. But at least if you have 5 people who are hanging on what you're writing, you're pretty fortunate.
This was when I left the trade magazine and started an association. One of the things people said was, I really miss your From the Editor's page because you used to have so much fun and it was never really pharma. It was just about you. And I thought,
that's your emails now. Your emails are great.
Well, that's for the podcast. Yeah. For business, I started doing a Friday newsletter where it was awesome. All links of business stuff, but I would have a wacky intro and a what I'm reading section at the bottom without telling them that pretty much everything I'm reading is podcast related because I've never publicized the podcast in the pharma side of my life. But yeah, I started doing that and just letting these little 2 or 3 paragraph riffs, and that makes, my pharma people happy that, that's Gil and his personality and his life out there. Right. And then there's the show and the email that goes around that. But yeah, it's I would tell you, worry less about the state of the world when it comes to, reasons why you should and shouldn't write,
What am I reading? That's what you're going to ask me next.
I could, What have you been reading?
All right. Well, when the pandemic started, and I realized that I was going to be holed up for a while, I decided to start reading different translations of the Bhagavad Gita for some reason. I don't know why. But it's all about living for other people and the war on selfishness, internal war on selfishness, and that kind of stuff. So I found that valuable. Lately, I'm reading Elizabeth Bishop's prose because I feel like that's the closest model to what I'm trying to do with the Patreon writing, is try to take the same rhythms that I would use in poetry and put them into prose. I don't think I'm ever going to write traditional line-broken poetry ever again. I think I'm past that. I'm much more interested in the poetics of the sentence and paragraph at this point.
Never say never. Just leave things open. Maybe at some point poetic lines will strike you and you'll end up,
maybe. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I spent so much time studying and thinking about line breaks that I just kind of stopped caring about them, I think. Yeah. And people just don't want to read that kind of poetry. I really want readers, I find. I think I need that communication loop to be closed in order for me to feel like I should keep doing this. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just keep a journal. Like, why even put it out there, if no one is reading? I'm also reading a book called The Lion in the Living Room. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's about house cats. I love my cat, so I'm always reading about him. And have you ever heard of a book called The Birth and Death of Meaning by Ernest Becker?
No.
Yeah, it's an old anthropological book about, the birth and death of meaning. But it gets into psychology and, who the hell are we? That's really been my question. For the longest time, I used to just wave my hands around and go, well, what is this? What is, I'm just here. You're not going to tell me where I was before. You're all worried about what's going to happen after you die, but no one wants to talk about what happens before you're born. I mean,
the beginning of Speak Memory by Nabokov.
Speak Memory, yeah. Wow. See?
That's an eternity of darkness on the before, an eternity of darkness on the after, and that little cradle tipping in between.
But, I'm trying to, and I'm also reading Sheldon Wollin's book, I think it's called Politics and Vision. Political philosophy. I'm probably the closest thing to what I actually am by training is a political philosopher, you know. But I really try to just keep that as a hobby and try to be like a lookout for my family. You know, like I called my mother, they were talking about the pandemic on the BBC, and I was like, stock up on food. This is going to get crazy, you know? I like that I read so many newspapers that I find things that other people don't find, and I know things that other people don't know. That makes me feel in control.
There's no control.
There is no control.
Your hands were never on the wheel.
My hands were never on the wheel. There is no wheel.
That's what I've discovered. You know, it's...
No hay cuchara. There is no spoon.
Yeah. There is also, because of my day job, things that you learn that you realize not only normal people don't know, but you can't actually talk about.
Yeah.
And not in any sort of, ooh, I have a secret, I'm special sort of thing. It's just the weird, like, yeah, this is a undertext that, you know, you'd have to spend a year explaining to people why it's happening the way it is. Although I will say the very last trip I made to DC in February 2020, they were shaking hands, still acting like, you know, oh, this isn't going to be anything. It's, you know.
Can't see it.
Oh, I'd gotten back from Japan 10 days or 5 days earlier, and, you know, everybody would go to shake my hand until I mentioned that fact, and they would leap away. Yeah. And I'd just tell them, like, do you understand? Everyone here is coming from somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
And, oh, Gil, yeah, this isn't going to be a danger. I'm like, no. I live in the woods in northern New Jersey. That's going to be fine. You know, I can hide for a long fucking time up there. You people can't. But yeah, it was.
I read a book by Kurt Anderson called Fantasyland.
Yeah, I had him on last year.
Did you really? Now I really feel great being on this show.
It was one of the most gratifying moments.
I have to listen to that episode.
Of my podcast life. We had to do a remote because of the pandemic.
It was a great book.
It's Fantasyland, and then the sequel is what we did the show around. Did a second book about the last from Reagan era onwards. But at the very end, I think he says it on mic, you're very good at this. And I just had that moment of, fuck yeah. Kurt Anderson thinks I did a good fucking job, you know.
And the other guy I like is the other writer that I really, really admire. And I admire him so much, and I can't remember his name. But he wrote Moneyball. And
Michael Lewis.
Michael Lewis, yeah. This is on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, no,
I've read so many of his books, and I think the movies that they make out of his books are great. I think she gets tired of listening to me talk about The Big Short. I mean, I talk about The Big Short until I'm like blue in the face, because I think it's like fundamental to understanding what happened to the economy in 2008.
I've experienced the same thing with a different government agency, much like the loan people who Lewis or the guys Lewis was covering interacted with. What happens if this goes to zero on your spreadsheet? Well, the spreadsheet breaks, and we don't want to fix the formula, so it's never going to go to zero. And we had that with the FDA once, where we said, well, what if you set that value to zero? They're like, but you can't do that. We're like, no, that can't happen. And if that happens, all of these other things are going to happen. And it was just, but the spreadsheet doesn't work if you make it zero, so therefore zero can never happen. Right. We're like, no, you need to fix your whole model, not have reality.
I've been meaning to read the book that he wrote about behavioral economics, about the whole movement to combine psychology with economics.
Kahneman and the other one were the two scholars.
Right. If you told me you interviewed Michael Lewis, I was going to fall
I've pitched him, especially because he's in New Orleans, or he's based in New Orleans, and we get down there with Amy's family,
right.
But we've never gotten a call back. Yeah. But that's the way the podcast works. I had the cascade effect of Well, I spoke with Kurt Anderson, and he really liked you spoke with Kurt. I need to, be on your show too. Or people recommend somebody I should talk to.
Right.
So, and you just learn to drop names. Drop Harold Bloom, drop Jules Pfeiffer, Roz Chast. Depends on the audience.
Tom Tomorrow.
It varies. Yeah, some people know who that is. Other people.
I was impressed by that. I liked Tom Tomorrow a lot. I think his comics are
become a friend, which is
really bright.
It was a weird trip for me. The people I've stayed in touch with and have actually become pals with. But that's what I went through, like I say, reevaluating my life during the worst case scenario stretch was this. And, this will be the thing that
so do you want to know what I learned from 20 years of Buddhism that might...
or from the last 3 months of reconciling your life and your body?
Well, I mean,
chemistry.
Buddhism, what I realized I left Catholicism because I thought that there were a lot of people there who were involved in the religion for the wrong reason, And I thought it was interesting that I found the same thing in Buddhism. Like when I was very involved in actually practicing Buddhism when I was living in California, there was this weird internal argument going on in the Buddhist world about a deity named Dorje Shugden and whether or not you should pray to this thing. And I was like, this isn't
becoming a
I
Catholic
realized that I
Protestant
didn't
story.
want another religion.
Yeah.
I wanted a philosophy. So, I kind of went through and I started reading a lot of Buddhism on my own and listening to a lot of talks, and anything that smacked of magical thinking, I would just throw it away, throw it away. It's kind of like the Jefferson Bible, just get rid of it, And there are there's one guy, there's a book named Buddhism Beyond Belief and Buddhism Without Beliefs or something like that, that talks about this idea that, a lot of this stuff a lot of the baggage that has been carried by this philosophy can be stripped away. And what you're really left with is, the idea that all you really have control of is the next thing you do, your next choice. Yeah. And that is really what karma is. Karma is the consequences of what you do today. So if you're worried about your future karma, look at what you're doing right now, And if you get really deeply into it, especially I particularly lean towards Zen Buddhism because they've done the most to kind of make it more of a practical thing. There's a lot of talking about cleaning and cooking and hygiene, things that you can do on a daily basis to keep you from either ruminating about things that you've done in the past that you feel bad about, depression, or obsessively trying to anticipate what's going to happen next, anxiety, So keep your mind here. And I think you're doing a pretty good job of that, I got to say.
Which I've got everybody fooled. It's great.
Yeah, but you know what it is? It's the kind of thing that you're never going to succeed at. It's the attempt that really matters. That's the other thing I've learned is that when it comes to Buddhism, I found myself in circles with a lot of people who had spent a lot of money because they wanted to be enlightened, And I was like,
you're kind of defeating the purpose.
You're so caught up in it, and there's something so American about that. Like, if I want, I'm just going to buy it, right? And they would be there every week. They'd bring their kids like mad. It was just like Catholicism, and they were expecting at some point, I better get this enlightenment thing, I think it's much healthier and much more real if you realize that it's seeking to get over yourself and realize that you're not really much without everybody else. Do you know what I mean? And if you can, all these religions are designed, I think, at the end of the day, to help you realize that. You're not a god, you're not an angel, you're not anything other than a human being. But being a human being is a very special thing to be because, come on, we're not the strongest animals we're not the fiercest animals on this planet. We're not even the biggest animals on this planet. But yet we've conquered this planet. We got the rest of them in cages, or running for their existence. Yeah. So, we are a destructive lot. But we do a lot of great stuff. So, what I'm hearing you talk about too is that you've gained a lot of perspective, from this diagnosis. You don't want to have leukemia, of course. No one wants.
But it's been an interesting.
But what I've learned from I've spent a lot of time talking to traumatized veterans, and I've spent a lot of time because of my dad, and I've spent a lot of time in group therapies, and I've spent a lot of time with people who are dying, and a lot of people get to that point where they realized that getting sick was one of the best things that ever happened to them, because it made them realize what was important, you know. And I mean, since your diagnosis, I mean, you're creating art, you're spending time with people that you haven't talked to in a while, you're probably reconciling and healing and forgiving, and these are all great things, right? These are things that, neurologically speaking, the research shows are antidepressants, you know? So a lot of good has come out of your leukemia diagnosis. A lot of good has come out of my diabetes diagnosis, you know? So I just think the only thing I took away from Buddhism was you have a choice about how you feel about things. And that's one of the greatest things about being a person, is like you can choose how to feel. And that's been one of the most liberating lessons of my life, ironically, after all the studying I've done.
Sounds good. We'll have more conversations. We just won't record everything, but
yeah, you can turn it.
And that was Charles Bivona. You can check him out on Twitter and Instagram at Charles Bivona and Charles Biv7, respectively. His Patreon is Charles Bivona, all one word, just like the Twitter one, which is CharlesBivona. And there'll be links to all that in the show and episode notes for this one. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking around. I am sorry for all my blathering. I've had a tough time. We'll put it that way. Sometimes I feel like that version of Achilles that I struck on the last time I read the Iliad. And I don't mean in the unstoppable warrior way or the grand glory-seeking guy. All I mean is what hit me about Achilles' isolation the last time I read the Iliad is that he's a guy who knows his fate, and he knows that no one else around him can understand that or even hear him when he talks about it. And I don't think it's just me. Anyway, we'll talk about that in future episodes, I guess, but not as explicitly as we do here. Anyway, if you want to help support the Virtual Memory Show, God knows why, after an episode like this, you can support it by telling other people about it. Let them know that under normal circumstances, there's this guy having really neat conversations with creative people and not blathering on about his own health or mortality, etc. You can also tell me what you like and don't like about the show, who you'd like to hear me record with, what movie, TV show, book, comic, piece of theater, music, piece of art, whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And you can do that by email, postcard, letter, or Google Voice message. The number is 973-869-9659. That goes directly to voicemail, so you don't have to worry about getting stuck in a conversation with me, and you can leave a message up to 3 minutes long. And you can let me know if it's cool to include your message in an upcoming episode. I wouldn't do it without your clearance or approval. That said, if you have resources or money to spare, then I hope you'll support individuals and institutions in need. You can find people through GoFundMe, Kickstarter, Patreon, Indiegogo, and other crowdfunding sources. And there are people who need help with artistic projects, with medical bills, veterinary bills, with everything. So if you can help people out, do that. If you're looking to help institutions instead, because sometimes it is uncomfortable to give to individuals, look to your local food bank, the Poor People's Campaign, Freedom Funds, voter registration funds. There's all different things you can do to help try to build a better world. So I hope you will. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.